folks. So we're going to get rolling now. A little bit deadline pressure because there's what is it, Oscars? There's a major award ceremony. The California Independent Booksellers Association has awards to announce tonight. And one of our readers has.
There's
running,
Leslie.
so we're going to. So we started early. Thanks for coming. Hope that didn't lose us too many people in the time change. But we're very, very happy to have the readers here. We can thank Patricia for telling me to read Tara's book, and that's what I did. And then I read Betty's book. Her cousin lives in the neighborhood as it happens, and said, "Oh, that's my cousin." I said, "Oh, okay." So anyway, so it's a family affair practically. Okay. So we have a moderator, Sabina. Sabina is
Yes.
her first name, right?
Mm-hmm.
Khan Ibarra and Tara Dorabji and Betty Shamieh, and they will pronounce things much nicer than I will.
It's perfect.
So I'm going to get out of the way right now, but those are the books. Believe it or not, I brought the correct books to the front of the room. That's the first instruction in event staging, is get the right books on the stage.
Hey,
Okay.
thank you.
Have fun.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. It is my absolute honor to introduce and to be in conversation with Tara Dorabji and Betty Shamieh. I'm going to read their intros, and then they're going to do their readings. Betty Shamieh is a Palestinian-American writer and playwright. Her plays include the sold-out off-Broadway runs of Roar and Malvolio, both New York Times critics picks. And Tara Dorabji is the author of the novel Collared Freedom, winner of the Simon & Schuster Books Like Us First Novel Contest. She's the daughter of Parsi Indian and German-Italian migrants. Her documentary film series on human rights defenders in Kashmir has won awards at more than a dozen film festivals throughout Asia and the United States. Tara's work has been featured by Al Jazeera, the Chicago Quarterly Review, Huizashi, and acclaimed anthologies Good Girls, Marry Doctors, and All the Women in My Family Sing. She lives in Northern California with her family and Rabbit. And Betty's going to read first.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for coming out. Arabella, New York City, 2012. It was not that September 11th felt like just another day in New York to me. It's that I had to pretend that it wasn't. I was only traumatized by how little I was traumatized. If you were thinking about hating me already, don't worry. You're in great company. Also, try as you might, you can't hate me as much as I hate myself. I had more skin in the game on that day than most New Yorkers who wound up with intact skin. In short, I had almost been killed. I was tunneling my way under the Cortlandt Street subway station, minutes before it imploded under the weight of the towers, fuel, and human hatred. So, I had been closer to death than my artsy New York intellectual and theater friends who stared out at the world with their eyes bleary with horror. In the first public gathering I had attended on September 17th, it was at New Dramatists. I was a month into my year-long gig as a director-in-residence there. In a circle we sat in that unconsecrated church in the heart of Hell's Kitchen to come together as a community. They all looked fearful, anguished, dazed, childlike and innocent, but in that Lord of the Flies kind of way. If anyone was going to be piggy and wind up with their head smashed in, it was clearly yours truly. I was waiting for someone to slip up and exclaim, "What kind of animals could do such a thing?" and then watch all the eyes in the room turn to me. And if that happened, I knew I would snap and spew vitriol of a rather intense nature. Say some regrettable things. In other words, tell the truth. Not feeling particularly safe? Surprise, surprise. The world's a fucking terrible place. Innocent people die horrible deaths every fucking minute of every fucking day. I'm always painfully aware how easily I could have been one of them. I'm a Palestinian. Yeah, I was born in America. But my parents never really left. And neither can I. When the country you are from no longer exists, you can never truly immigrate from it. Give my people a homeland so I can finally ditch it. Give it the big middle finger and pledge allegiance to another flag. Until then, I was born there. I live there, and I can't leave there. Not a day goes by where I don't feel haunted and hunted. Every day is like September 11th for me. Welcome to how I feel all the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Okay. Tara's going to read from her book called Her Freedom.
And I love Betty's book. I recently finished it. It took me a little while. And I think what's so masterful about it is how she's able to hold the complexity, the grief, the pain, but also the humor. She had me laughing and crying multiple times. So
Yeah.
such an honor. And our books have been twins, which has been so fun. So the publication dates were a week apart. And now again, our paperback releases. So lovely.
And she was my teacher so before our books came out. She taught a workshop for me. Yeah. So I'm very honored and grateful to be on the stage with you.
Yeah, that's our connection is
Yeah.
rooted and written with you.
Yes, and we'll get into that.
Yeah. So this section I chose. It's one that I do read, but I think that increasingly has become more relevant here in terms of the ability to move around without the paramilitary, the police stopping you, and what can happen in a moment and what the headlines will read. Aleem gripped the bars of his motorcycle, and Aisha pressed her chest against his back. She hadn't wanted to leave the house or her bed, but he'd convinced her to come on a picnic, choosing an outfit for her. Aleem secretly prepared and packed all her favorite things: goat curry, pomegranate chicken, rogani, and carrot halva. In the 3 weeks since Vida left, she'd become depressed, taking codeine and sleeping all day. Aleem heard from a friend that Vida was safe in the mountains training. Regret filled Aleem for all he'd missed with his son. Nothing would ever be the same. The cars ahead were stopped at the military checkpoint. When Aleem got to the front, he pulled out his ID card and handed it to the soldier. "What are you doing?" the soldier asked. "Going up to the mountain for a walk," Aleem said. Aisha's breath was even and calm behind him, while Aleem's fingers sweated on the handlebars. "Why don't you just take a walk around here?" the military officer asked. Aleem knew better than to appear exasperated. "We wanted to see the flowers blooming and spend time at the river." "Oh, so you like nature. Please step off the bike." Aisha scooted forward to keep the motorcycle from tipping over. "What's in the bag?" "Just some snacks." Aleem didn't look at Aisha, couldn't stand for her to see the humiliation on his face. The soldier's dirty hand reached into Aleem's bag, exposing each surprise he'd prepared for her. "Your wife must be a good cook. You don't mind if I take some? Here we are defending you, and we are so far from our own wives. I miss home-cooked food." The soldier confiscated the chicken and goat curry. Aleem bit the inside of his cheek. They were left with bread, halva, and walnuts. The soldier pushed the barrel of his gun against Aleem's back and told them to move along. The muscles on Aleem's neck tensed. They could kill him. And the newspaper would only report militant killed near the border. The sun splashed across Aisha's skin as she and Aleem sat on a picnic blanket on a hill. Clouds covered the crest of the mountain in the distance. The river was opaque with mud from the rains, and poplars darted up like arrows sprung toward heaven. Alim closed his eyes. I want to paint this. With brushstrokes, I could hide what is really happening. You could paint locusts. Just make the army locusts, she said. He ate the bread, dry and unsatisfying without curry. I could paint a flood, show that one day water will flood the army out. Or Nadistan's army would break the levees to flood the people of Charagan and seize more of the land. The beauty of the water is that it knows no borders. It flows across the nations, Aisha said. Just paint the rivers.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Tara. That was gorgeous. You do mention that your stories are like twins, but they're also they're like speaking to each other. There's occupied people. There's this, if you read both of the books, you can see the parallels. And and Betty brings the funny tone to it, and you have a quite different tone, but both beautiful. Thank you. So you write about books. Your books hold love alongside like these difficult situations. Like, how do you guys? How does love survive in these difficult political situations in your stories? Tara, did you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, to me, all stories are love stories at the heart, and that's the center of the human condition. And so initially, I had a lot of politics I wanted to talk about. So the story came out a lot about, and it's very much inspired by the independence movement in Indian-occupied Kashmir. And so, like, in the beginning, there was sort of like a political manifesto. So it was sort of like, oh, if you want to write a political manifesto, write that. But at the heart of the story was the love between Aisha and Alim, between Aisha and her mom. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, that's what moves us. And what moves us through the most difficult times is love, right? And that's what powers. I mean, it's a story of Aisha from a little girl to a grandmother. Her mother, Noor Jahan's a midwife, a healer. And their love is complicated. But it's the love that drives them to protect their family, to protect their culture and the land around them as well. And so to me, like, the heart of every story is love. And the love story is what really beat on the page as I started to craft Call Her Freedom.
Thank you, Tara. Betty?
I start and end the book with a line that says, I feel haunted and hunted. Mm-hmm. And my editor was like, do you want to start and end in the same place with the character? And I was like, and do you want to start a book saying, you can't hate me as much as I hate myself? What does that mean, to hate oneself? Because I've been like listening to, James Baldwin and Toni Morrison on Instagram. Their proper venue, obviously not, but here it is. If I'm going to be online, I might as well listen to revolutionaries. And they asked Toni Morrison, how do you survive? And she said, sometimes you don't. And I think for me, the story is about, all the characters learning to love themselves in some partially survived way. I don't believe you can go through the experience of being marginalized in the way that Palestinians are and demonized. I never say dehumanized, because I feel like if 1 million puppies were being treated the way 1 million Palestinian children are treated, the world would stop. So I don't think they're making them animals. I think they're making them demons in the minds of people who allow this to kind of violence to continue for such a long time. So I don't believe you can not be infected with, and so for me, the story is about the 3 women in 3 different generations learning to, if not to fall in love with themselves, to maintain the ability and desire to actualize a self where they could love themselves. So.
Oh, wow. Thank you. And both of your books actually deal with multiple generations of women. How do the women in your lives that come before you help you shape these women? Betty, since you just talked, do you want to speak about
Well,
that?
my mom's here, so I'm going to have to censor myself a bit. Mommy's here. Yes. I think, you know, like I forgot the question. I just said my mom's here. And that's it.
Well, I was just saying that both your books deal with multiple generations of women and how the women in your life, influenced these women.
Ma, can you step outside? No, how are the women in my? I think the legacy, of freeing somebody when you are not free, is I think the greatest gift. If we just inch ourselves towards, freedom, or call her freedom. I think that's if you just lighten the load each generation of what you carry. They say that if your family knew hunger 5 generations back, 5, and think about like your grandmother's grandmother, what if anybody ever went to sleep hungry? That your ability to throw away food or to think about food or to think about scarcity is in 5 generations later, impacted by someone within your line not thinking they were going to survive a night, so I feel that about the emotional content too. The women are not particularly nice to each other or themselves. And I think it's important to show how you cannot have patriarchy without the participation of 50% of the population trying to get that little percentage of approval, whether it's looks or power or acceptance. So if we are not complicit in our own subjugation, the world would look very different. If we were not trying to reap the rewards of living in a society where the rewards are unequal, if we're not trying to each get a little bit more than the other girl or the other Palestinian, the system would not be able to sustain itself. So for me, it's about freeing somebody when you yourself are not free, and how almost impossible that can feel.
Oh, beautiful. It's kind of sad how this is so relevant to today. A lot of us can, relate to what you're saying, unfortunately. Tara, same question.
Yeah, sometimes it's funny. People pick up the book and they'll be like, "Oh, I'll get insight into like your relationship with your daughters," and I'm like, "Oh my God!" Like, I did not write this book about me and my family, and yet there is a lot of inspiration in terms of the strong women. I think that when I look at my mom, my grandmother, they were liberated in their own ways and took it, and also like. My grandmother, like one of the stories she tells and retells was like how she was at the top of the class and she wanted to go to university, and like, no, she like was not allowed by the parents, and the teacher came and begged, please let her go. And it was like a no, right? But then she was like running all these stores and like had a business and like, so I think that value of understanding the economic part of your own liberation as a woman, to be able to control your own economic means, comes very much from my lineage in terms of the women in my family, and also this essential thing about education. Like, we will support you and we support the women in our family to be educated, and that's part of our gateway towards freedom, and that you claim it in different ways. And it's something that you claim in your home and then also on a larger community scale. So I think those parts really stayed with me in the writing. And I think it's interesting too, the 3 generations, because both of our books, I was like, oh yeah, 3 generations of women. And it's like the next, how many generations of women? And it's, I think also you see the patterns, you can unpack them over time. And so when dealing with war and occupation and how it plays in a community, it's not a story that starts today. It's something that started generations ago. And so to be able to trace those moments, I think helps us see it both in the lineage within a family, but within a larger geopolitical context too.
Oh, thank you. That's like a lot of pressure as a mother to daughter, like trying to teach that to your daughter, and hopefully by how we exist, they, absorb that. Another thing I did notice about both their work is like for the personal history, personal stories meeting with, the greater history. How do you incorporate that into your stories? And I know yours is fiction, but still largely influenced by Kashmir. But also, how did you make sure that the history part did not become overwhelming and take over the story? Tara?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a constant battle, but you have to focus on the story. And then sometimes you get in these rabbit holes and you get super excited. You're like, that's the best fact ever. Like, you try to shove it in the novel and then the character rejects it. And you're like, oh, won't go. But it is a beautiful fusion that happens. And you can absorb a lot in it, but the story has to unfold. And I think it's also how much context do you need? And sometimes people really push for more context. They're like, I want this because I don't know that. And then sometimes it's okay to leave your reader a little uncomfortable so that they can grow, they can learn, they can find another way. But I do think it's a powerful portal to learn. And I learned a lot in creating the novel, and then kind of let it fuse in so that you do get the rich data. And then I think also it was helpful for me to have different outlets like documentary films so that I could just apply the research, or I did investigative journalism along the way. And so you can find the right container for the story. But I do think that the most powerful part are the characters. So I follow the characters. They come to me and I let them lead.
I love that. I love that the characters basically decide the story. Thank you. Betty?
Geez, I don't know. Well, the first thing I want to say is it's something that's also really interesting to me is most debut novels are not 3 generations. Most of them are like, what's that artist as a young man? You know what I mean? Like it's one dude or one woman, you know what I mean, getting through life. It's so the fact that the structure is, and it's about both books are about in some ways legacy is really really interesting to me, and I find that kind of the form. Question again?
The question is like both of your stories have like the personal story
Yes.
and a history, and
Sure.
how is it that how did you write the story without feeling like you were overwhelming the story with history?
Well, I feel like it's being called a comic novel, which I think is very smart. Because it is a very funny novel, because it shows how horrible people are. Like the grandmother Level's generation finds out she has to run and leave her nice villa, in Jaffa that her family was able to build because some supposedly gay uncle got killed in a Ford factory, and they have this blood money. So they go and they build this beautiful villa in Jaffa. And then this guy that she's got a total crush on comes, and he's at medical school in Lebanon, and he brings his girlfriend who happens to be Jewish. So she's done all this thing, you know what I mean, hoping to invite this man and have this, like, she says that to have dinner with somebody has to replace having sex, because this is all I'm going to have with him. The experience of breaking bread is the most I can get near to this man. So, and then it's interrupted because there's a massacre and she has to run, and she's like, well, at least they're not going to get together now. No, do you know what I mean? Like, so like really, and I do believe, but I wrote this to end in 2012, and the love story has a guy who was a medic in Gaza, because what's been happening in Gaza has impacted the Palestinian community for decades. I remember in 2009, I kept saying, how is this happening? How is a captive population being bombed? I don't understand how this is happening. And I was young enough to be like, this can't happen. Like this is not going to happen. And I remember I was sitting with my parents and a friend who was an Israeli artistic director who had brought me to Austria to produce one of my plays. And he's like, of course it can happen. I said, but it can't. It just didn't occur to me that could happen. And there were all these really handsome young medics who were going into Gaza. And I went to Gaza in 2002 with some artists, because you could go back and forth and I actually went with Tony Kushner and some very famous playwrights. And obviously it was a DEI hire that they had this young playwright who was a delegation of, well-known playwrights and the one Palestinian playwright that they happened to know. So we went to Gaza together in 2002. So I had very strong images of what happens is there's so many children in Gaza that schools can't operate at the same time. So they do it in shifts. So you will literally be, sitting in a coffee house and you'll see the shift. So you'll see a sea of children looking like little officious bureaucrats because they're wearing, and it's just like a moving sea of children. Some are going home while the others are leaving. And the most cramped place you could imagine. So I said it in 2012, and then this latest, convulsion of violence, but basically the girl who's one of the main characters is getting set up with a guy who's went to Stanford and is a fancy doctor who's going to volunteer. And she's like, I want you to have a mortgage and pay for my life. I don't want you to go to Gaza and get killed. So showing the humanity, to me, is the way to show the history, because I believe human beings operate that way. Like, I believe even if I was in Gaza, if there was the love of my life and he was near me, no matter what was going on, I would still have feelings and still be alive in the way that you don't, when you think of people who are suffering starvation and war, you forget that they are actually, even until they're unalived, human. And so that was for me the fun of showing these these moments, but showing them how a Palestinian actually lived them, which was as a human being. So,
thank you, Betty. That's powerful. Yeah, I think that sometimes even as nowadays we look at these images, we become desensitized, and that your stories remind us that there are these humans and lived lives that we should be looking at. One of the other questions, both of your stories, home is very important or central to the stories. I was wondering how home, or the idea of home, has changed for you after writing this book, or how you think about home, what home means to you. Betty?
I'm going to go first because I'm going to forget the question. So. Can I go?
Yeah, go for it.
So, by the time it gets to me, I'm so enthralled by what she's saying, and then I look and I realize I have to say something, and which I didn't because I could just listen to you. It's about a girl who doesn't want to leave New York City, and she grew up in Daly City, and it kind of paralleled my home. Because I lived in New York for 20 years, and so it parallels. So it's always really interesting to me to be in San Francisco, where I grew up, but have no adult memories, because I have a child and he's 11, and I have a lot of memories, but I have no adult memories of being a young person in this city and in this world. So home to me is very funny when I talk about it in San Francisco, because it is my actual home, but I don't have a lot of lived experience here. And that's also how I feel about Palestine. It's like, you know what I mean? My family founded a village that turned into a city called Ramallah. Mm-hmm. So for 500 years, we can trace every single person who back to these founding fathers, who are represented by lions in the middle of the city. So even though my parents got married here and came in their, early childhood, or my dad came as a teen, my mom came, I think, 10 or 11. My lineage, and you know what I mean, the vast majority of kids people made love for 500 years in that place, and I felt the weight of wow, I should really find a lover here. Do you know what I mean? Which I probably shouldn't say in front of my mom, but do you know what I mean? The weight of 500 years and if you are, read the Bible, it's he begot this person and that, there's like these long lists of people who beget other people. And so it's very strange. And I talk a little bit about, some Palestinians, and my character is my nightmare of who I am. She's horrible, and she's most horrible to herself, but she's horrible in a lot of ways. And she's always shooting herself in the foot and always thinking she's the smartest person in the room and always having the rug pulled from under her. So, and that's kind of the fun of comedy, which is like the person who thinks they've got it all under control is like a mess. So I feel like she just wants a homeland so she can get on. She's a theater director, get on with her life. She doesn't want to have to like, you know what I mean? It's not like some spiritual thing. Because I think as much as we like to have homelands, everybody, including the undocumented immigrants who are being terrorized, everybody who is here, who is not Native American or Black, had somebody like in their lineage who was like, you know what? I'm going to do something different today. I'm going to move across an ocean, and so we as Americans, if we have anything in common, except of course for those two groups who had no choice in the matter, is we come from a lineage of people who were like, not so much this village, not so much this, genocide, not so much this. And they make this enormous journey to live in a melting pot where it doesn't really melt. Do you know what I mean? Like, I can't imagine, even as urbane as I am and sophisticated as I am, moving as an adult and taking my kid to Italy. Like, I just can't imagine suddenly I'm Italian and I have to learn Italian and figure out that system for my child and figure out economics of, so the idea of immigration and who does it, that's the one thing that I think unites the people who come here. And no matter how we come here, no matter how we're treated here, there is someone in that line, again, very, very deliberately excluding the groups who did not have a choice in the matter. But I like what somebody says is about, the descendants of slaves. We're the children of people who chose to survive. And so you're either the children of people who chose to survive, or you're the children of people who chose to survive and had an adventure. Do you know what I mean? By coming here. So, yeah.
Thank you, Betty. I like this idea that home, like when I asked you about home, it wasn't just one place. It was, you took us all over kind of. Thank you. Tara, what about you?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. I think there's aches and longings. So I'm the daughter of migrants. So both my parents came to the U.S. My dad's from Bombay, so that's India occupies Kashmir. And we're ethnically Parsi, so that means that our people came from Iran 1,000 years ago and settled largely in Bombay. And so I think it's interesting to have this lineage that's very accepted as like a migrant group within India. And then you have indigenous folks in Kashmir who are so persecuted. And so kind of holding that disparity, I think has become more pronounced to me in the writing of the book. And then what does it mean to return to homeland in the process of creating the novel and then after? And so there's questions of access for me. My first documentary film that I released on Kashmir is a documentary on torture, so state-sponsored. So there's questions about, like, what does it mean then to return to India, right? Is, like, will there be access issues getting in, getting out? But for the Kashmiris that I know that live in the U.S. that do work, there's not a question. They just simply cannot return. So I do think that there's different types of privilege you navigate with based on where you're born, your migration story, that have become more pronounced. I think not being able to return to Kashmir it's by no means my homeland in any way, but like some place that is deep for me. And so to meet with Kashmiris and ones that I've met there and then be here now and know that we can't go back together feels like a loss. So I think there's some loss in it. And also for the characters, that's the big part of the experience is this is your land that's been in your family for generations. And how do you move through that? And what's the love that you pull through to reestablish yourself in the story? So I think there's those parts of it. And then I think through writing this story, like this book, also there's new seated communities. And so that's a different type of homecoming is like the connections that are created.
Yeah.
And also then being someone who's born and raised here in the Bay, like my relationship to that, knowing that this, in terms of the genocide that took place here and the parallel that happened between the Americas and then other occupied regions. And so there has been sort of a beautiful coming together of women, like Indigenous women from here, Kashmiri women, like having them in conversation and circles, talking about their grandmothers being displaced from land, but also having these deep connections. That's a new type of, homecoming and creating of community that's really beautiful, that I think has been one of the biggest gifts.
Thank you. It's interesting reading both of your books that I felt like I learned something about the communities, even though I have friends. But going through the perspective of these characters gave me such an insight into the character and their feeling of home. And for someone like me, I'm from northern Pakistan. I'm Pashtun, so we never had our land of our own because the British came in and did the Durant Line, and so I felt a little bit. Although that's maybe 4 or 5 generations ago, I felt some kind of way. Like, how did my ancestors? I have no idea, but how did they feel when they were separated from their family? So beautiful. I have one more question, and then if you guys have questions in the audience, you guys can think about it. But what I wanted to ask is, what do you guys hope readers, especially women, carry with them after they're done with their book? Reading the book. And who wants to go first?
I just want people to be sensitized to the fact that every image you see of that person, who is suffering abroad has hopes and dreams and desires as profound as yours. And that's, and it's hard for me because you can't process the pain after a certain point. But, and I think that that's something that if literature can do anything, it can just make you step a little bit softer in the world. And even be more generous to the people around you. It doesn't have to be some cosmic, connection, but just the idea that every single person has wants and hungers, and as deep and as meaningful as your own.
Beautiful, thank you, Tara.
I think definitely this idea of living in freedom, like it's sort of our natural state, and it's something that you can, like, it just can't be taken away. And there's a material part and an occupation that can happen, but the spirit can't be caged in that way, I think is one of the key parts of the book. And I think this also sort of this idea of relationships are hard and they're complex, but like that love grows deeper and can flow deeper and really anchor. And so I think that is another central part. And I'd say, the title, I'm sort of like, the title's a little fascinating to me. I love it sort of, like, I tried to translate it into Spanish, and it was funny. It took me a second to, it's like, oh, it sounded different. And to find the right words of what it is, because it's a call, right? It's a call to action, like call her freedom. But in the book, the moment that happens is a devastating moment for the character. And I think that's the story of heroes, right? When a hero is born, a lot of times they're born from this tragedy. And within that, though, we have the relationships that hold us through that, like whatever it is. And so being able to build those and like really have, like live in love in that way, I think is a central part of this book. And then I think there's like the part about Kashmir and a lot of people not knowing about Kashmir, and even saying like, so for me it was a victory when I had, the marketing like with people.com, like that byline was like a novel about Indian occupied Kashmir, because that ran like, it just runs simply like Simon and Schuster ran that like as the PR, which is fantastic, but within India, that would be enormously like you would get in a lot of trouble. And so it's been really a unique opportunity being here and being able to speak directly to the occupation in a way that within India, people don't have that same ability given the state-sponsored narrative. So to be able to rupture the narrative with truth has been a really powerful part of it. And so it's also exciting to see people in India take the book and South Asians here bring it into a conversation where sometimes the Kashmir issue is entirely missing. It starts to have voice. And then what becomes even better is then the Kashmiri diaspora gets to step into that space and like share their art and stories too. And so that has been like a really important part of the journey of the book for me as well.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely. Both books left me thinking about both of these places. And like I said, that the fact that you guys are reading together, they came out together, it's just so cool. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions for Tara or Betty or both?
Stunned.
Everybody is like,
I really want to express appreciation for the trio of voices on the stage. Palestine, Kashmir, Pashtun, in an era where we have the madness of Nordic Aryan mythologies that are trying to destroy all of us, everything that's human and important in our souls. Events like this are absolutely essential, and I really deeply appreciate what I've heard today.
thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for making it possible.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Thank-
I have a comment. Betty was just talking about how desensitized we are because we are looking at all these things in the world today, and it's one day after another. I wake up every morning with a heartache just by feeling and seeing what I see every day, and not only here but in the world in general. And you were suggesting that we need to be sensitized to it. What's the inspiration? How can we be sensitized since we are so bombarded with all these news every single day?
So there's a, I just read House of Spirits again because I read it in high school, and all I remember is the torture at the very end. I don't know. I don't hope I'm not ruining it, but there's torture apparently in Chile, and I wanted to kind of relive that, And so when I say that, it's obviously not for somebody who's so open that they're feeling what you're feeling every day. I don't, that's actually sometimes, that saying, like the people who ask, am I talking too much, are never the ones who are talking too much. So if you're worried about caring, in a world where you feel like heartbroken before you get up and hear birds singing and be happy to be alive, then that's not directed at you. It's more even directed at me. You know what I mean? Like it's more directed at and there is also, it's something I'm struggling with right now because I, live in America. I write in English. I went to fancy schools, and I so easily could have ended up either, shot by a settler in the West Bank or under the rubble in Gaza. Like to me, that feels very present as a possibility. Like some people can go to community college or they could go to San Francisco State. You know what I mean? It feels like within the realm of what could very easily have been my life. And so how does one move through the world with joy, and resilience? And I think how one does it is to, look at the Palestinian people who so easily could be like, you know what, can I just go to Egypt? I'm chill. I'm good. Do you know what I mean? And if they can find a way to find joy and be resilient and to be human and alive, that it doesn't help when we're demoralized. It doesn't help when we are not, because you do only have this one life too, and everybody is on a spectrum of privilege and safety. And so I would say it's like that anthology. If you think you're worried about not being sensitive, you're probably being sensitive to the point that it's heartbreaking. And so I think I say it that way because most audiences that I address don't wake up heartbroken.
Yeah, and I would say I've had some people, sort of, they'll push back against the book. Like, why do you take us there? And war is ugly. And some people don't get a choice to close a book. They're simply there just because they're born there. And so I think that's a really important thing to take and hold. And somebody said too, like, our minds weren't made to process this much. We have like a village mindset. So the amount of tragedy and information we can access in a day is beyond what our sort of brain organ can process. But I think it's important to feel that grief that when it comes in, right? And so what I was telling my daughter, because we've been obviously very focused on Minnesota, what's happening, the deaths there, the young children being taken into, 5-year-olds being taken into detention centers. So we're not looking away from it, right? But it's also like you have to feel it and then you have to let it run through you. Like you can't let it get stuck. But it doesn't mean that it's not there and you're not accessing it because it's a reality. It's a lived reality. So I think as long as it's a lived reality, we have a responsibility to view and experience it. It doesn't mean that we have to stick in it, because I think also there is a part of the reality that's really beautiful, and there's a lot of beauty around us too. And so the other part is like being able to harness that beauty so that we're able to share that and push that out, right? Because there's like a healing that has to happen within ourselves and also within communities and with folks that are going through this trauma. And then the question is like, where do we actively stop that violence from happening, right? Because that's the problem. Is it's like we wake up and you're just like, oh my God, what's next? And then there's like 10,000 things. So it's like this ability to be able to also maybe not, like, it is a deep and personal experience, but not just see it all in fragments, right? There's another story that's part of the larger thing. So I think it's both. I think it's the ands, right? Experiencing it, let it run through the larger stories at play, and then like how do you root yourself in also the beauty and the love that's around us too, so that we can bring that to one another.
I don't know what you guys just said, but it reminded me, and both of your stories do this, is there's so much beauty in your stories. It forces us to see a reality, but we also see a lot of beauty. It reminds me of a poem by Hanif Abdurraqib. He mentions that he was at an event, and some white woman said, and the person speaking was African American. He wrote a beautiful poem about a flower, and as the white woman said behind him, "How can these people think about something as beautiful as a flower in a time like this?" And it was during the George Floyd era, and it really stayed with him. And then he wrote this poem, kind of pushing back, saying, like he said, we have the right to recognize the beauty, but then we also, within that beauty, can find the pain, and to do both, like you said, the ands. Does anybody else have any questions? I briefly wanted to say how I knew them. So I'm part of the Writers Grotto, and I'm the director of Rooted and Written. And Tara is one of our faculty members, and she teaches. And Betty is a fellow, an alum. And so I'm also an alum. And so that's how we know each other, is through the Rooted and Written program. Yeah, and
Do you want to explain what that is?
Yeah, sorry. So Rooted and Written, I'm acting like you guys know what that is a BIPOC, tuition-free BIPOC program for writers of color, and it's once a year. You guys can apply if you go to rooted-written.com. You can find more information and basically apply. And there's 5 genres and faculty. There's fiction, there's memoir, screenwriting, poetry, and I think, did I already say memoir? Essay. And so there's 5 different genres, and BIPOC writers are, especially emerging writers, are encouraged to apply. And then we have about 40 fellows every year. And it's been amazing. I mean, we've had published writers. Our teachers are published. It's really a great program. So if you guys know any writers of color, please do share. And bookstores, we don't have. I should have brought something, and so you guys can put it up. It's going to be this year at the end of April and beginning of May. Maybe Eric, I'll send you something so that you can print it out. Okay? Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for. Yeah. Yes, Leslie.
I love what you said about that reading can, in relation to the desensitizing, whatever that word is, and the walking softer in the world. Because I guess any one book. I mean, each one is gifts us with more understanding, and just in the history of humanity, there's so much brutality. There's so many wounds, and but I liked that phrase, because to me, sometimes you're just so outraged and they're that, or you desensitize and just cold and close up. But I like that because there's a gentleness in that, and it allows for, I feel like, a kind of vulnerability in a person, like myself, if I'm reading these books and other books, and it's like, it's not just nourishing my heart, it's like making my heart more intelligent, but also open and interesting and interested. I don't know. It's just like changing the heart over time, so that we can have conversations with different people and also have those simultaneous moments of joy and humiliation, or gratitude and grief.
I think that if you care about everyone, you have to care about yourself too. And when I mean walk softly, take care with yourself as you're moving through the world. You know what I mean? And nourish your spirit and your, and the people who nourish you. And so that's what it's, even when you're walking softly, it has the connotation that you're you're not treading hard, but you're also gentle with your own feet. And I think that that's really important as a human experience. It's in order to love everybody, you have to also recognize your own personhood.
It made me, when you said it that way, I thought of, walk softly but carry a big stick.
Well, if you read my book, you'll say there's a lot of sticks. And they're throwing them, and they're, they're tripping over them, and they're, what I mean? But yeah, it's don't tread on me, that snake that bites, what I mean? Like, there's a lot of, what I mean? But it's which was, I don't know where I saw that in grammar school, like being taught, like, don't tread on me, like an American, do you know what I'm talking about? That snake image, but it is, we are treading, and they're snakes and they might bite us. So we got to tread softly, and you know what I mean? But I do think it's important to take care of oneself and extend oneself the love and generosity and grace that you want for everybody else in the world,
Yeah, I mean, I agree about the nourishing. And I think that was, in writing this, I remember there was times, because like when I started, my daughters were 4. I came out in the world, they were 18. But there were grind times when it was like I had 2 toddlers, caretaking my mom and my grandma and like working a full-time job as a single mom and trying to do the art. And I had a friend and he was a painter, and I remember like get up earlier and earlier. And one of my mentors, Toni Morrison, was her mentor. So Toni got up at like 5 a.m. My mentor was like getting up at 3 a.m. And so there was a lot of changes that I had to make in my life to nourish myself. And, my painter friend, he was like, if you're tired, go sleep. Of course he didn't have kids and all of this stuff, but he was like, just sleep, because you can't create when you're empty. And so I think that was part of the practice that I had to build, was that I don't have to get up hungry and like face the page first thing in the morning and like create a system to nourish yourself, and then creativity will flow. And so there's been a huge, now it's this strange blessed time, but I don't, I start writing at like 10 a.m. after I've had my walk with Deborah and like done my stretches and written my morning pages and had a lovely breakfast. And so there is a way to also nourish yourself as part of the creative process in addition to life.
When I had my kid, I tried to get up early to write, and I kept getting sick. Now it may have been, he was in daycare, so for part of the time, and so he's bringing home a lot of bugs. But it may also have been that I'm just not Toni Morrison, and I'm not able to get up that early and be an editor and edit, Angela Davis, and role like that. But I think there's physiologically, I'm not capable of getting up, like that early and being talk about treading not lightly in the world, like road rage. It's so funny. I was talking to someone, she was saying, Betty, you're blazing a trail. And I was like, yeah, but even when you're blazing a trail, you got a lot of road rage. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like you think of blazing a trail. You don't think of somebody like saying, get off the fucking road. You know what I mean? Like, Like, what are you doing? Do you know what I mean? Like, what are you doing? I'm trying to blaze a trail here. You know what I mean? Like, so it's just funny how one balances, and I think I talked to Tara about this a lot, because I'm in the throes of day job and child care and trying to write a book, my second book, and she used the word grind, and it didn't occur to me that's what was happening. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? That it's actually a grinding experience. Because I was like, why am I not more comfortable? Why am I not having an easier time? Why am I not? Because it's and I think that when you think of coffee, do you know what I mean? Like, it's just compression, so I don't know. But yeah, realizing one is not Toni Morrison is, or, when you're starting your first novel is not the inspiration you want, but I had to do it in the hours that I was not, I couldn't do the AM stuff.
Yeah, and I think too, like, it challenged me to think about, like, I don't want to get up at 3 a.m. to write. And also my body started to hurt when I didn't stretch, and I would get out of bed and like, then I'd look at my other authors I knew and I'd be like, wow, he just had back surgery. I don't want that back surgery. So like, how do you shift the paradigm? And, and it was like, it's a constantly changing thing. My mom told me, like, you don't have to do everything at once. Take a season. So then sometimes I'd be unemployed, and that would be a good time to write. And so like, you move your life in seasons. And I mean, even like at one point I had a job, because I was like, I'm so tired of being an arts administrator that never gets to do art, right? Because that's all I would do. I get these day jobs, I'd be an art administrator, and I couldn't do art. And then I was like, why don't we have a staff fellowship and structure it so we can apply? And then the artists on our team could have a way as part of their job to do a little bit of art, right? So there's like how do you dip in? How do you change? How do you start to change the conditions so that you can have more of a creative practice, a little less of the grind sometime, right? But like sometimes it's just a grind, like that happens too. So I think it's that balance, but also not being afraid to dream in new possibilities and leave space for that imagination and call it in, because sometimes it comes.
Yeah. definitely. I try to write too, but I'm doing directing right now, so I'm not doing a lot of writing. But the compassion, once you find that compassion for yourself, I find that's when you can write. Like when you're constantly really hard on yourself, or when I couldn't write. And the moment I'm like, well, I'm not going to get up at 5, but I'll do it when my kids go to school at 8. I was able to write more. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just curious if you'd be able to share something about what you're each working on now.
Book number 2.
No, it's not. It's announced, and I paid someone to put it on Instagram because I don't understand Instagram. But I sold my second book on proposal, which is terrifying. Which means you write like an outline and then 3 chapters. And so but it's, while I was doing research for this book, I found out about a unit of Israeli spies who were from Damascus and Baghdad. And they went undercover and married Palestinian women in the 1950s and had fathered children with them. Then they were like, hey, you can't stay here anymore. Let's go with our kids. You know what I mean? And the women had to essentially choose. But it's a documented thing that was happening, you know what I mean, in the 1950s. So it's a murder mystery set in Redwood City where a spy and a patriarch, and you don't know if his own son wanted to kill him. Do you know what I mean? Who wants to kill this dude? But it tracks an Israeli and American, 2 people trying to, 2 investigative teams trying to get to who killed him, because so many people wanted him dead that it was hard to figure out who did it, so but yeah, I play with genre. This was called a romance by NPR, which I thought was hilarious but also very true. I feel like my book is if like God of Small Things and Sex in the City had a baby, this would be my book. Do you know what I mean? Like, so I feel like Harlan Corbin and you know what I mean, some really austere, important person had a baby, it would be my murder mystery, which is like So, yeah, what's nice about it is like, people are like, don't talk about what you're doing. I'm like, oh no, if I talk about it, I have to do it. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not like, oh, if I hide it from you, you know what I mean? And that's ta-da, no, I have to do it now because I keep talking about it, so.
Yeah, I'm working on my second novel, and it similar themes, multiple generations of women and secrets, but it takes place in the Bay Area, so spans about 100 years. So there's like flashbacks to the 1960s, looking at Livermore, home to one of the world's primary nuclear weapons lab, then flashing forward to 2060 here in San Francisco and looking at a future reality around advancements in AI. And so really looking at lineage, culture, humans' relationship to the land and technology over generations of women once again.
Coming to a bookstore near you soon.
Next party. Yeah. I'm working on my excuse is COVID happened, my kids were young and I haven't had time to finish, but I've written my first novel, but I need to edit it. It's about 2 Pashtun American sisters growing up in Northern California. And there's also some magical realism in that. And yeah, yeah.
And Sabina's an amazing poet, too.
Oh, yeah, I'm working on a poetry collection as well. Thank you.
Yeah, your poems make me cry.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, but I am like so busy working my day job and then directing the Rooted and Written that I haven't had time. But this year I promise to edit and submit. So that's a promise to myself. Like Betty was saying, you have to say it out loud so you're accountable.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank
Next
you.
book, we're waiting for it.
Yeah, now I have to do it.
Yep.
So we just put something on the calendar for the 3 of you.
Yeah. In a couple years, we'll be back.
We'll hear from them.
Give us 2 years.
2 years.
2 years, we can come back with our books.
1 month.
Wow.
You're faster.
Feel a little pressure.
2 years. Oh, I don't know.
Yes.
Hello, Tara, I have a question now about your timeline. You start talking about 1960 to 2060. I'm thinking, 34 years from now. How you chose that particular, was 1960 then just projecting in one century, or where we are presently and the way technology is moving as swiftly as it is, that 34 years from now you were kind of like placing?
Yeah, I didn't know I was going to write into the future in this book at all, or in my second one. And I didn't set out to do like a dystopian futurism thing. And then it happened, and I think there's an acceleration of AI that we're going through right now, sort of like akin to the internet, perhaps, right? So we're in this like next wave. And so the more I researched it and pushed it out, the more uncomfortable some of those lifestyles became, and sort of the possibilities. And then also I have plot stuff. So I'm like, how old is this person? And da-da-da-da-da. And I had a big 2001, September 11th. So a lot of the frame is there. So it's also about my characters, how old their parents are, what their experiences are happening. And then that tracks with global events. So yeah, I didn't anticipate doing 100 years. And then I was like, oh yeah, I'm dipping back to the 1960s. And then I popped forward to 2060 because I also have multiple generations. So I'm like, oh, the baby's going to come here. So then this is the year. So it's a bit of math. And then also I think that separation from this reality. Because the other thing too that happens is once you turn in your book, you have like a year until it comes out type of thing. So there's this lag. So how can I get a book out that still speaks to the future when I don't even have my contract yet? So I'm like, okay, that gives me enough time. So there's a little bit of that too.
Does anybody else have any questions? Okay. Thank you guys so much, Tara and Betty. That was so amazing. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to Birds and Beckett for having us. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So good.
Yeah, so good here.